So we have Marcus Capone, Spencer Gerrol, and Jessica Kantor. I'll start with Marcus. He is an entrepreneur in residence at Red Cell's healthcare practice. He founded TerraMind, a care navigation and engagement platform to increase access to and affordability for psychedelic medicine. His vision is to offer health plan coverage to employees for psychedelic-assisted therapy. He is chairman and co-founder of VETS, which means Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. It's an organization that provides resources, research, and advocacy for U.S. Special Operations veterans seeking alternative mental health treatments. Marcus started his career in finance at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch, and also started a boutique risk management consulting firm that eventually merged with a large-scale government contractor. Spencer Gerrol is founder and CEO of Spark Neuro, a leading neuroscience company that makes objective measures of brain health accessible for the first time. Spencer has spent the past 18 years applying his cognitive science background to bring biometric technologies out of academia and into real-world adoption. Spencer's passion is understanding cognitive health, including neurodegenerative diseases and mental health conditions. And last but not least, our moderator of this panel, Jessica Kantor. She is a freelance journalist and communications expert specializing in healthcare, human rights, and international relations. She currently serves as a director of communications at Bell+Ivy. Her background includes director of digital strategy and media relations at Solutions Recovery, regional media relations manager at American Addiction Centers, and over 10 years of published work for publications such as Fast Company Magazine, The Postscript, Las Vegas Review Journal, and Healthcare Quarterly Magazine. So over to you, Jessica, to kick things off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Jessica, welcome. Spencer, welcome. And we lost Marcus for some odd reason. Thank you, Nicole, for making that wonderful introduction. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, we'll wait for you to log on, but thank you so much for having us.
And I'll let you kick it off. This is going to be great. I enjoyed having our conversation as a preparation for this, and it's fascinating what you are doing. There we go.
There we go.
Up to you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, yeah, so, Nicole gave everybody some really great introductions. That's amazing. Thank you so much. A little bit of an introduction to the topic is, what's happening in health tech. Let's talk brain health. We have seen as a collective a lot of industries recently going through much needed evolutions. A lot of them were pushed forward because of the pandemic, and industries needed to evolutionize in order to survive. Brain health and mental health are still relatively new industries, and they still have yet to go through their true renaissance. And one thing that we're seeing is that while studies and experts have been trying to work out how the brain works for years, much of the treatment that occurs is actually subjective. And due to a lack of advances in data gathering, measurement, and even technology, what we know about the brain and why it does what it does, how diseases and illnesses are caused, and most importantly, how they can be treated, they're still largely unknown. So today we're going to talk about some amazing strides in cognitive health and mental health, why there's been such stagnation up until this point, and what's next. So yes, welcome Spencer and Marcus. Oh, did we lose him again?
Looks like he might be back. Thank you, Jessica. Looking forward to it.
Well, okay, yes, we have him. Well, we'll start with you, Spencer, just because you have a little bit more of a secure network, but I want to hear from both of you. Nicole gave some really great background, but what is the issue that you're solving for, and how are you solving it?
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Hey, Marcus. Hopefully you can hear us okay. So, yeah.
I can hear you okay. I'm having not great, not having a great time right now with everything that's been happening. So let's just continue on and see how this goes.
Okay.
All right, we'll kick it off. Thanks again, Jessica. So, you asked, you know, an important question. First of all, just quick background on what is the work that we're doing. We'll get into more detail. But you asked, you know, why is this important to humanity? Why is this such a big problem? And so the work we do is we measure brain health, and we measure it objectively. We actually run a very non-invasive, easily accessible, but nonetheless brain scan that objectively measures your brain activity and gives you an indication of what your brain health is, if there's any diseases that you need to be diagnosed with, so that we can properly treat every patient that is facing these kinds of illnesses. So why is that so important? I don't think anybody would argue that's not important. You know, brain health is clearly, you know, our brain is what runs us. It's what allows us to do everything we do all day, every day. But it's probably even more critical and more important than any of us realize on a regular day-to-day basis. Let's think about some of the stats that help point that out. Right now, about 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's disease or another cause of dementia. It's been an exponential increase over the last 20 years and will continue to be an exponential increase. It's doubled just in the last 15 or 20 years. It's to the point where Alzheimer's kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined, 2 leading cancers. It's the 6th leading cause of death at this point. And as I mentioned, with all these demographic shifts, it's just increasing exponentially. That's just one particular disease that I zoomed in on.
Mhm.
Now we can think of the breadth of all of the other brain health conditions that we deal with, other neurodegenerative diseases, mental health conditions. 1 in 5 adults experience some kind of mental illness every year. So the huge, the grand nature of this problem is so big, and it hits us all financially too. Right now, if we again just zoom in on just Alzheimer's disease, the 1 in 5 Medicare dollars was spent on Alzheimer's patients, 3 times that of any other patients who aren't Alzheimer's patients. And we're set up for that to bankrupt all of Medicare. Last year, $355 billion was spent on Alzheimer's, and it's headed towards about $1 trillion at a really record neck break pace. So, again, we can zoom in, we can zoom out, but if we can't measure brain health effectively, then we can't develop and measure the efficacy of the treatments that we need to be developing and making sure that we're refining. We won't be able to diagnose the people who need these treatments, and we won't be able to provide the kind of precision care that's necessary in this area. So, what we're doing is we're measuring brain health directly and in a way that is completely objective. And it couldn't be a more important time in the world for this, just given the grand nature of how big this problem has grown and what's set to come next.
Wow. Yeah. And I have more questions for you about your technology specifically, but right now I do want to give Marcus the platform to also share, the work that he's doing and why it's important to humanity.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you. And Spencer, it's good to see you. And sorry about some of the issues that we were having earlier. So just excited to be here. I think right now, reducing, what we've done with the nonprofit vets and what we're doing now with Tar Mind, I believe, we have to reduce trauma. And I also believe that if we could raise, I'm going to call it raising global consciousness, it's not going to only impact an individual, but when I get better, the spouse gets better, the children get better, family unit gets better, the friend circles get better. So, we're not talking about just, individual healing here. We're talking about really healing humanity. Everybody suffers when an individual suffers. And so, I believe it's important because we have 60 million people, and I don't know, Spencer, if you mentioned that just in America that are dealing with mental health issues, and those are the ones that we know about. The numbers supposedly are greater. So we're not healing 60 million individuals. We're healing 120 or 180 or 300 million. And I think that we need to continue to destigmatize mental health care. I think asking for help is extremely important. We talked about this prior, that we have to start treating mental health like it's a shoulder or knee injury. You know, when you have those, when you have an injury, when you have an issue, you go get it fixed, and so you can get back into whatever you're doing. So I think we need to treat mental health as, you know, if you need a tune-up, you go seek out what Spencer's building. You get diagnosed, and then you go find us, and you figure out how you're going to get it treated, and then you get back into the game of whatever you're doing. And so, you know, for me, I had struggled with mental health, separating from my time in special operations, and you know, finding healing through psychedelic medicine was so life changing. And I think that I think humanity can really benefit from the healing power that these medicines have to offer.
Mm. So Tara Mind, it's a care and navigation and engagement platform, correct?
Yeah, I mean, our main, you know, our mission is access and affordability for individuals seeking these medicines, because right now there's really a bottleneck on vetted providers. We're still, majority of these molecules are Schedule 1 here in the US, although that's happening, the change is happening rapidly in terms of the legislation. And I think I want to talk about that later, but, you know, just in general, you know, the mission of TARA is to accelerate equitable access to evidence-based mental health care. So we have to measure outcomes, right? And empower our community of providers that are providing these treatments, the tools they need to not only measure, but also to communicate with their patients, so they can deliver, you know, these therapies, and not just psychedelic therapies, but alongside traditional medicine. So, you know, we shouldn't just tell people that, you know, everyone is a candidate for psychedelic medicine, but the ones that need it, they should be offered these alongside, you know, any traditional approaches that may be working. And, you know, our vision is elevate your mind. So, or elevate every mind.
Fascinating. Well, so since we're on the topic, you mentioned legislation, but in general, you and your partners, so you're helping oversee psychedelic assisted therapies and treatment. With psychedelics being the Wild West, you know, how has that road been in creating measurable outcomes, putting together protocols, and making sure that this, you know, not relatively, but actually new industry leads with research and data?
Yeah. Well, ironically, about 2 hours ago, I was at the Pentagon meeting with the, to name it in civilian terms, basically the chief of staff for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because this is such a big topic. And we got invited in to specifically speak on the work that we've been doing at Vets, because right now there are so many veterans that are leaving the country to do psychedelic medicine. And nobody knows, like you just said, it is the Wild West. So where are they going? Where are they getting the medicine from? Who's manufacturing these molecules? You know, are they even a candidate for this? So it is a bit of a Wild West, and it's why we, you know, it's why Vets started, and it's why the birth of TAR Mind, to reach the greater population. But, you know, when you're talking about the research, the powers to be need to see the data. And right now, we finished a recent study with Stanford for one of the molecules called Ibogaine. Ibogaine is incredible for brain health. Those results will be made public soon, but we're talking about almost a reduction of 80% for PTSD, for anxiety, for depression. I believe almost every individual, or close to every individual in the study, those 30 participants had a substance abuse issue. 85% of those individuals stopped utilizing either alcohol, or if they were taking an opioid for surgery. And then I think the big home run is the reversal of brain age, and that's going to come out soon, and something that, like, we've never seen before. So, you know, the research, I believe, is starting to show. I mean, gosh, before these drugs got put on Schedule 1, you know, there was already over thousands of papers published, showed the efficacy rates. And so, yeah, I just think that, you know, it's exciting. We're sitting, you know, what Spencer's doing. I think, you know, we're going to start to see biologics play a big a big role in how we're diagnosing, and then also how we're going to treat. I'd say maybe within the next 5 years, but I'm trying to be conservative.
Yeah. And well, so you mentioned, all the work that you're doing with making sure that everything is, properly measured and data. And Spencer, I know that's something that you're working on as well. In general, cognitive health and mental health industries are largely missing accurate measurement and data. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, Jessica, I think the number one reason is because it's hard. We all carry this 3-pound mass on top of our neck between our ears, the human brain, and it is arguably the most complex thing in the universe. And so, the idea of, well, how do we measure this properly? We need to just start by acknowledging this is not an easy problem. You have hundreds of millions of neurons in your brain with billions of connections and electricity flying all around at all times. It's a really, really difficult challenge. And we look at the modalities. How do we measure this? Okay, we can get an MRI. It's like taking a photograph of your brain. And if you take a photograph, it's like static photograph of a brain, then maybe over the course of years, I could say, your hippocampus is starting to shrink. Decades. That's not good. That's not going to be fast enough. There's other modalities, right? We can extract cerebrospinal fluid, do a lumbar puncture, a spinal tap, pull out a bunch of fluid and run some really complicated labs on it and look for different, proteins that are malfunctioning, that are, connected into the brain. And well, that's a pretty invasive procedure. It's not something that we have broad access to everywhere. And I'm not signing up to get a spinal tap because I'm just going into the doc for my annual brain checkup or just checkup. There isn't a brain part of it so much right now. Yeah. You can get a PET scan. Really amazing things can be done with that. Important to acknowledge the inaccessibility of it. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's not a piece of equipment or technology that is widespread. And by the way, if you want to get a PET scan, you have to be accepting of the risk of about 1,000 times the radiation of that of a chest X-ray. So we've got a really complicated problem. We've got some really amazing technologies that are just inaccessible and carry risk and still aren't giving us a really accurate picture of what's going on. So what do we do about that? That's the problem. We'll talk, I think, as the session goes on about how do we solve that? How do we deal with the fact that we've just got the most complex thing, and we need to be able to measure it better. And that's exactly what we do. And I'm looking forward to digging in more deeply.
Well, let's dig in now. Tell me about the technology that you're using.
So what we do reads the neural basis of all cognition. So the electrical activity that is flying all around your brain. And we use actually pretty basic technology. From a hardware perspective, we use EEG, electroencephalography. EEG is a bunch of electrodes, not that different from an EKG or ECG that's reading the electricity that your heart is beating out, except a lot more sensors and across your brain or across your scalp. The challenge with EEG, like everything brain, is that it is inherently incredibly complex. So you have this dichotomy. It is the richest signal of brain data, arguably, that we have. When we're running a scan, we're getting about a few million data points per minute of different frequencies of electricity and different amplitudes and different locations sort of communicating all with each other. And that complexity, or that richness, comes with complexity. It's really tough to analyze that kind of data. So the story continues, and you sort of have this amazing computational power that we have today with cloud computing. You have machine learning practices that allow us to develop artificial intelligence, or algorithms that help us make decisions about what is actually going on in your brain. It gets really fascinating when you dig into the math and the science of exactly what we're computing. But just to kind of keep it at a simple, you feed in millions of data points, train algorithms to deduce from all of that data what we need to learn, which is, does this patient have cognitive impairment? If so, at what severity? Is it mild cognitive impairment? Do they have dementia? And if they have any kind of cognitive impairment of any form, what is the cause of that? Is it because they have Alzheimer's disease? Is it because they have depression and anxiety and sleep apnea combined? Is it that actually it's not all, it's Parkinson's or it's dementia with Lewy bodies? So what our technology does, you go into your doctor. Right now, it's subjective things are really the norm. If any questions at all, how you doing? Let's talk about it. Here's a questionnaires, surveys, neuropsych testing. And here we, put a cap on your head, run a quick scan, patient just sits calmly and still. And then lots of very complicated analysis happens in the background that I started to touch on. And, within seconds, a report is produced that says, here's the level of cognitive impairment. Let's monitor that over time. And here's the cause from a pathological or disease standpoint. It's exciting stuff. It's I get to do every day the thing that I'm most passionate about. I get to work with some of the smartest scientists and physicians in the world in achieving this.
Wow. Yeah. So, and you brought it up, the fact that, treatment is so subjective, not just like on the terms of a patient coming in and sharing how they're feeling, but then also in terms of, a psychiatrist who might be making their treatment based off of what pharmaceutical visited their office in the last week. So, will your technology and technology like it start to impact these treatment plans? Is this going to be available to doctors all over the place, or how does access to this increase?
Yeah, the majority of diagnosis of really any condition, it's not happening in the specialist level. So your point about like, is any doctor, any patient can be able to have access? That's critically important. Even if you look at dementia, 80 to 85% of it is diagnosed by primary care physicians. They're not trained to do this. They've had maybe an hour in their whole career of training around the different dementia causing diseases.
Wow.
Wow. It's a really tough thing. And so, yeah, they need tools like this. We need to make it accessible to everybody around the country, eventually all around the world, in places that even have less access than we do in places like the United States. And let's dig into the question that you just mentioned, tie it back to some things that Marcus said. Somebody goes to the doctor, they say, hey, I think I might be experiencing some depression or some anxiety or some PTSD. It's something's going on. They have some conversation. The doctor says, great, here's what we're going to do. Try this drug. For you, Lexapro, for you, Prozac, for you, Zoloft, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we're not going to know it works or doesn't work for another 6 weeks, maybe longer. Hard to say. Why don't you give it a shot? Come back to the doctor. Hey, doc, I'm actually worse. This depression has grown to suicidal thought and ideation. What do we do? Was it supposed to be Zoloft for you and Prozac for you? Like, there's no rhyme or reason to making that decision right now. It is actually a guess. There isn't a piece of data that says, here's the drug that we're going to prescribe for this patient, given their unique brain chemistry, given what we're seeing. And that's incredibly risky, and it's creating a lot of problems that I know Marcus and his organization are working on addressing as well. So yeah, the answer to your question is that is not okay, and that will change, and not in the too distant future. Our technology is being adopted at some of the most amazing academic medical institutions in the world, and scaling out to other important healthcare facilities, and it's not far from the point where we change that dynamic to let's understand your unique brain and what is the right treatment protocol for you, what's the right dosing, and let's have you come back, track the progression, and ensure that you're on a good path. We all know we need that desperately. Whether we thought about it as actively as I do every single day, I think is sort of like embedded in the wisdom of the crowd that is an important thing.
Well, and that discussion is the exact same discussion we can have with you, Marcus. You're working with a variety of populations, but most importantly, you're working with one of our most vulnerable populations, the vets. And a lot of them do have, depression, anxiety, mental illnesses, PTSD. So when do you think that the work that you're doing in psychedelic assisted treatment is going to impact, the treatment and the care given to that population? Are you already seeing an impact?
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing an impact even from the small amount of individuals that we're able to fund for treatment every year, at least on the nonprofit side, where I think last year we budgeted for 175 individuals. We funded 250, but we receive up to 10 applications a day. And again, it's what led to the birth of Tara, where we just want to be able to increase that for the greater population. Legislation's happening very fast. A new caucus was introduced a month ago, a bipartisan effort to really just provide science, research, and education to our legislators. And supposedly in talking to them, they're going to be very active, right? The idea is not just to introduce a caucus, just to put their name on it. They really want to educate because there is a huge mental health issue. I mean, it's the number one issue right now in the employer market, is mental health. Suicide in the DoD and in the veteran space is also top of mind. And so these decisions can't be made in 5 to 10 years. We really need to be proactive and kind of execute now. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of catastrophic things happen in the near future, and we don't want that to happen. And so I think I mentioned it earlier. I want to be conservative, and I would say, within the next 5 years, I think we're going to be having a different conversation. I don't think we're going to stigmatize, at least psychedelic medicine is what we're talking about. I think mental health will be more destigmatized, and hopefully with the help of storytelling and I think leaders and influencers and stepping out. And we're seeing a lot of it now, in the last couple of years, that people are actually coming out and telling their stories. And so, at least with Tar Mind right now, I always go back to storytelling, but education for both the provider market and the consumer market is going to be a big deal. We want to be an aggregator of that information, right? So both providers and their patients can have real discussions and more informed decision making. But we need education. So hopefully we'll be an aggregator of education. And after they make those decisions, what Spencer alluded to right now, you go in and really there's kind of a guess of what a primary care physician or mental health practitioner is going to afford an individual. So hopefully, as this goes along and as we can collect outcomes data, and we can provide the right tools to measure, before and after treatment, there's just going to be better decision making. And then once those decisions are made, we can hopefully, now communicate between the provider and the patient, because the patient really does want to, communicate with the provider. So if we could provide the technology for them to do that, of course, the individual who may initially get better, we can monitor those outcomes 3, 6, 9 months down the road. And I think that's where we can then be proactive when an individual may be struggling again, whether we need to bring that individual back in for treatment. And the last piece, which is my vision and my passion, is access and affordability. People can't afford these therapies right now, and so they're not covered as part of an employee benefit plan. And our true North Star to reach 100 million people in the US is to bring these to the employers so they do have equitable access.
Yeah. And so what do you need to make that happen? More education?
Well, I think it's a combination. So part of it's education. We can educate individuals, but if we educate individuals, sometimes we may reach an individual. But if we educate a provider who has 300 patients, now that provider can spread that knowledge to their patients, and patients will understand that there's treatment options out there that they can ask for, that potentially they'd be willing to look into. So education, legislation, I don't know what else.
Funding.
More outcomes. I mean, right now, mental health. What's that?
Funding. Always
No,
funding.
I mean, funding. Well, yeah, always funding. What are you saying? Funding for us, or funding funding
research.
individuals so they're able to, yeah, right now most of the funding is donor dollars. So there's only so far that donor dollars are going to be able to go. I mean, right now the MDMA clinical trials are all funded by charity, by donors that have been giving for years, and that's why we're here on the Hill and speaking to the Joint Chiefs. Like, we can't fund this anymore with donor dollars. We really need the federal government to step in, start allowing some or reappropriating some of these dollars in order to move technology along.
Yeah. So the work that you're doing heavily needs education, it needs understanding, and it needs a legislative push. Spencer, the work that you're doing at Spark Neuro, what does that need to move forward?
I think about that in terms of something that exists in the medical industry that is fondly referred to as the Valley of Death, and we've leaped over it. So we're kind of like, that isn't our risk at Spark Neuro anymore, and so at this point it becomes scale. And we've been very fortunate. We've attracted some of the most well-known investors in the investment space, and certainly the investment dollars are incredibly important to us. We're raising our next round of capital now. That's part of why this conference is happening. And we're also fortunate that we have a lot of government dollars. We have funding from the Department of Defense. Of course, we have Marcus here who has personal experience with that, and the DoD does acknowledge to a certain extent this problem and put money towards it. And we're studying brain injuries and the extent to which brain injuries lead to other conditions, including mental health and including neurodegenerative diseases. So, in terms of what's needed, it's a very trite answer to say at the end of the day it's funding, but certainly that's the case. Like, funding in the right directions for the right technologies, the right companies that are following an approach that is most likely to be successful. I'm always here to make sure, even when I'm working with investors in our company, that I can be part of the due diligence process for the other deals that they're evaluating, because that is a really, like, if we talk about the complexity of machine learning and AI, and then talk the complexity of the brain itself, they're tough topics. It's pretty difficult to figure out where are the right places to put our dollars. That's certainly a problem that I also want to be a part of solving, and make sure that people are getting the right advice along the way, so that they're fueling the things that are most likely to have a real effect. And one thing I realized along the way is, how do we measure our success? For the sake of my shareholders, I'm supposed to measure my success in billions of dollars, and that's true. That's my fiduciary obligation. But what's important, I think, maybe for any entrepreneur to recognize, certainly any entrepreneur in this field, what we really need to do is measure our impact in billions of lives. And if those things will just come hand in hand. If you create something that has such utility, it's so important, it must be used, it's widely adopted, you don't have a question anymore if it will be worth billions of dollars. And so I try to think about it from that perspective. I think that will help us scale in the right direction.
Well, this discussion is so fascinating, and there's so much to share. Unfortunately, we are nearing on our time. I've been given the official nudge, but we did have a question from Patricia in the audience for Marcus. Do the psychedelics treatments have a treatment time phase, or are the most places on these meds permanently? So I think that means, are there treatment time phases for the psychedelic assisted therapies, or once you're on it, are you going to be on it for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think great question. And I think it's one that we get relatively often for individuals that have never really coming into this space as newcomers. I think that is yet to be seen. I think that we are hearing a lot of individuals that are microdosing. Right, a lot of individuals kind of started in the Bay Area. Individuals were taking microdoses of psilocybin, of LSD, and some of these others to increase creativity, to focus more. And that's fine. And I think there's a market for that, right? I don't think it's right now, but I think there's a market for that. But that can potentially be similar to taking medication on a regular basis, where I feel like we're trying to get away from. Now, the other side of the house, what we're doing with heavily traumatized individuals or have deep depression are flood doses. And a flood dose is you're taking a very large dose of the medicine in a therapeutic environment. You're being monitored by either an integration specialist or medical team, depending on what molecule you're taking. Those experiences can be anywhere from, let's say, 4 to 12 hours, depending on which drug. And some individuals I have seen do this one time, and they come completely off their antidepressants and maybe other mood stabilizers. Like myself, I threw my bottle of pills away in 2017, Veterans Day, ironically, after being on them for 7 years, and have never had to take an antidepressant ever again. Others need to go back for potentially a second treatment. And then from there, some of them do start microdosing just because it helps them. So again, medicine should be personalized, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the next. So I hope I answered that as cleanly as I could.
Yes. And then real quick before I pass it over to Karim, how can people find you both if they have any further questions or they want to continue the discussion?
Yeah, we're two places. So my business, taramind.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. And then, on the charity side, if you're interested in what we're doing with veterans, we are at vetsolutions.org.
Great. I'll answer as well. Shoot me an email. Easiest way. My email address is spencer@sparkneuro.com. Spark is like a spark of light, SPARK, and neuro like neuroscience. And you'll find me there.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Spencer, Marcus.